Wolfgang Streeck directs the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Societies in Cologne, Germany. The title of his most recent book is both somber and unnerving. How Will Capitalism End?
The end of capitalism can then be imagined as a death from 1,000 cuts, or from a multiplicity of infirmities, each of which will be all the more untreatable, as all will demand treatment at the same time. As will become apparent, I do not believe that any of the potentially stabilizing forces, be it regime pluralism, regional diversity and uneven development, political reform, or independent crisis cycles, will be strong enough to neutralize the syndrome of accumulated weaknesses that characterize contemporary capitalism. Contemporary capitalism is vanishing on its own, collapsing from internal contradictions, and not least as a result of having vanquished its enemies, who have often rescued capitalism from itself by forcing it to assume a new form.
Contemporary capitalism is vanishing on its own. That's an enormous thought, and because it's so big, I think sort of a frightening one.
It is. And if one has to elaborate on this, one would say that capitalism is not just people making profits. It always had to be a social order that supported profit making. And in order for this to be possible, you had to have some governance, some mechanism of containing the capitalist core of society and holding it responsive and responsible to the social needs of people who would provide legitimacy to the capitalist organization of the economy. And in practice, if we look back at leading theories of capitalism, this sort of fragility, the need for the capitalist economy to be embedded in a social order, was always present in the theories of capitalism, from John Stuart Mill to John Maynard Keynes, and in between Karl Marx, Schumpeter, each of whom expected capitalism to come to an end in their own lifetime as a result of its internal contradictions. And rather than now saying, well, these people must have misunderstood something, I think the insight one draws from this is, first of all, how fragile the system is and how contingent on its being rescued by opposing forces that contain it and keep it sort of useful to the surrounding society.
When did you realize that it was actually coming to an end? When did you come to that realization?
My moment of rethinking social scientific theories of social change and social development was in 2008. 2008 sort of told me that the capitalization of social and economic life can reach a point where things can happen that can tear apart the fabric of modern society in a matter of a very short time.
And so it was the economic collapse of 2008 with the fall of Wall Street and the collapse of basically the system that led you to believe that this is it, we've reached the end.
More precisely, that it convinced me that we have to rethink theories of social development in terms of allowing for the possibility of a major breakdown, even in the absence of a new order waiting to be introduced possibly a better order to be introduced as a succeeding order when the old order disappears. So the notion of a linear progress, or as I say in a more sort of tongue-in-cheek way, the Bolshevist notion of the end of capitalism. Bolshevist because there is a party waiting that has a blueprint for a new society and that takes power and announces capitalism is over. From now on we have whatever, socialism or whatever. I thought that this was too simple and that one has to allow for the possibility that the thing becomes sort of extremely fragile and tenuous, even without an opposition being able to replace it. In fact, from this figure of thought, it is not difficult to see that in the past it was very often the opposition to capitalism that secured its future life in a changed, adjusted form. So one can say that capitalism stabilized itself through its opposition. And now my sort of intuition after in the 2000s was to look around and see where is the opposition. And there are good reasons to argue in a global capitalist economy, the capacity of society to organize an effective opposition to the proper dynamics of capitalism is extremely low. In fact, we do not see such an opposition that is comparable to, for example, the social democratic or socialist or communist parties that in the nation states of the 19th and early 20th century provided, so to speak, the containment for the capitalist core. I read with, it's not just academics, I read with great interest the recent book of Mervyn King, who for a long time was the governor of the Bank of England, very much in the hardcore, you can say in the heart of darkness of financialized capitalism, writing a book where he, which is called The End of Alchemy, where he says we're facing an era of great uncertainty in which even insiders do not know how to handle the contingencies that are now being unfolding before our eyes, and we have no theory to understand what is going on. And if an insider like this argues like that, I think we're entitled to take that seriously. My main argument, or my main sort of contemporary argument about contemporary capitalism, is that we have lost these institutions in the process of globalization that has disempowered nation states, trade unions, regulatory agencies, and so on, and resulted in the enormous growth, both in surprising events and defenselessness of a growing number of people against the dynamics of capitalist progress, which is how I explain why in our countries that are still democracies, we now have this enormous increase in political discontent that has resulted in the election of Donald Trump, in Brexit, in the impending possible election of Marine Le Pen as president of France, in the political fragmentation and stagnation of the Mediterranean countries in Europe. Also, I would like to add, in the growing number of failed states on the periphery of the capitalist system, where the idea of some sort of managed capitalist growth and development that existed in the 1950s and 1960s after decolonialization has become less and less credible.
You say at one point in the book, infinite growth in a finite world. But that sounds like it was unsustainable from the beginning. It didn't just develop into something that was unsustainable.
And it is important to keep in mind that all the major theorists of capitalism in particular John Stuart Mill, but also Marx, actually understood that the inherent lack of a capacity for self-limitation was an important cause of instability. Now, in all these theories, you see that they did not anticipate certain capacities, of course, for example, technological development, to stretch, to buy time until the moment when growth hits the wall, so to speak.